Hey guys, welcome back to another DCO Live. Hope you guys are doing well. Tonight, I'd like to thank and welcome again 13th Century Whiskey for sponsoring tonight's show. Steve Russell, a small craft angler. Gosh, I'm already tongue tied this morning. I hope you guys are doing well tonight. Again, I want to thank 13th Century Whiskey for sponsoring tonight's DCO Live. If you guys are into bourbons and whiskeys, go over to 13thcenturywhiskey.com and check out what they've got. They have a great selection of whiskeys. And one thing that I really liked about it is the unique bottles. The gentleman who started 13th Century, I guess, was like a glass designer or a glass blower, I guess is what you would call it. But each of these bottles are very unique, and it really makes the bourbon really cool. I mean, when it's setting up on your mantle, the bottle really adds something. But if you guys are into bourbon and whiskeys, go over and check out 13thcenturywhiskey.com. And then they do have a store locator right here on the website. And so if you're in Colorado, Nebraska, the Carolinas, or Texas, you'll be able to find a store near you that you guys can ask for 13th Century Whiskey. So, guys, I really appreciate them for sponsoring tonight's DCO Live. So, let's jump into it tonight. Again, if you guys have questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat box. Hey, David, glad to see you here tonight. Hope you're doing well. I've got already have a couple of questions kind of already tuned up here. You guys know that. So again, throw them up into the chat box and I will take those as they pop up. But there were a couple of questions that have come in really in the last couple of weeks that I really wanted to kind of talk about. One was, what is my favorite rod and reel setup for inshore fishing? So let's start with the reel. The reel, I like a 2500 or a 3000 size. If you're doing the kind of fishing that I like to do, that inshore skinny water stuff, a 3000 size reel is really the biggest reel that you need. You're not going to hook into anything that is going to require a 4 or a 5000 size reel. That is just overkill that you don't need. You guys have seen me reel in 25, 26-inch redfish on a 2500 Daiwa Legalis, and it has plenty of drag to handle that fish. It is not a problem whatsoever. So I like a 2500 or a 3000 size reel, and I like it spooled up with 10 or 15 pound braid. All of my reels that I have right now are all spooled up with 10-pound J braid. And I really like the 10-pound because the diameter of the line is so thin, the castability is fantastic. I can get those nice bombing casts to stay away from my target to give me enough room so that I'm not spooking any fish whatsoever. I'm making, almost like a 30 or 40 yard bomb cast up to my target. And that 10-pound braid is very castable and you can get those distances. Once you start getting up to that thicker braid, that I'm even going to say like 30, 40, 50-pound braid, you're not going to get the castability that you can with a 10-pound, because as that line shoots out through the guides of your rod, that is creating friction and it's reducing your casting distance. So 10, 15-pound tops is what I would say inshore that you guys are going to need. Now for the rod, there are two rods that I like to use. One is a 7-foot medium light fast action. I love that. The sensibility on those are fantastic. And I also like a 7-foot medium fast action. The medium just gives me a little bit more backbone where I can throw, a half to a 3/4 ounce weight a lot better and more efficient than a medium light, where I usually don't go over a 1/4 ounce on my medium lights. So again, I had a gentleman ask, hey, what's a good budget friendly, rod and reel? Well, when I am shopping rods and reels, if I have, let's just say, $200 to spend, I will spend the majority of my money on the rod than a reel. So let's say, $130 to $150 on a rod, $50 to $80 on a reel. That's how I would do it. The rod does pretty much everything that you are going to need. The rod will load for your casting distance. It's got the backbone to fight fish. And so it's got the sensibility for bites and feeling the bottom. So if you guys are going to spend money, save your money for a good quality rod and then get yourself a good reel. I'm not saying go to, I hate to pick on Walmart, but, don't go to Walmart and get a $20 spinning reel. It's not going to hold up in the salt water. I like the Daiwa Legalis. I like the Pin Battle 3. I've had those now. I've got them sitting right here beside me. And, I've been using those reels now for a couple of years, and I'm just doing some routine maintenance on those pretty much monthly. I'm wiping them down and kind of hosing them down after each trip, but then I'm oiling those reels about once a month. And really, it's only a couple of drops of oil to keep those things working very smooth, just like new. And if you take care of those reels, these things will last for years. So, guys, there are some really good reels out there, like the Vanfords. Shimano's got a fantastic line of reels. You know, I think they're absolutely excellent. But to me, if I'm going to spend money, I'm going to spend money on a rod before I do a reel. So hopefully that answers that gentleman's question. I reached out to him and told him that I was going to be answering his question tonight on DCO Live. So hopefully that helps him out. Everett D. Gilmore, glad to see you guys. I'm glad you guys made it in tonight. Appreciate you. There was another question. I had a gentleman who reached out to me on Facebook, and he's been catching black drum, and he wanted to know about black drum fishing. Well, I reached out to him and I said, I don't target black drum. So here's a couple of things that I know about black drum. And Steve, I know that you're on tonight. Maybe you can help me out with this, but black drum, you can pretty much find where you find other fish. Look for your structure. Look for your oyster beds around docks, deeper holes, things like that. Now, the one thing that I do know about black drum is they will hit live bait. They usually don't hit artificials. I have seen them caught on artificials, but they usually prefer live bait on the bottom. Shrimp, cut mullet on the bottom. You're going to pick up black drum if you're targeting black drum. So that's about the extent of my knowledge to black drum. I don't target them. I don't know why I don't target them. I just don't. But if you guys have any tips and tricks on here, please throw them into the chat box. I'll share them up with everybody. But I do know it's live bait and structure for black drum if you guys are going to be targeting them. So those were kind of the couple of questions that I wanted to throw out tonight. And then there's really a topic that I've wanted to hit now for about a month because of, okay, Steve just popped into the chat box. He said live bait bottom changes in hardness. Okay, so are you talking like hard bottoms, like sandy bottoms, potholes, things like that, I think is what he's talking about. Black drum are bottom feeders. They, their mouth is on the bottom of their head, and they have these little whiskers on, I'm going to call it a chin, but on the bottom of their mouth, I think they're called barbels. And that is how they feel and root around. And I know they've got a good sense of smell. So, cut bait, shrimp, things like that on the bottom, and you should be able to pick up some black drum. So, yeah, Steve said, yep, absolutely. So cool. I appreciate you, Steve. Thanks, man. So there is a topic that I wanted to hit and touch on, and that are some of the South Carolina fish regulations, um, catch limits, and how many per day. We have so many people that are moving down here that don't saltwater fish and they don't know the regulations. Well, the first thing that I am going to say is don't trust anybody's information that they are giving you. Okay? Go look it up for yourself. Go to SCDNR, Google SCDNR, pull up the fish regulations and look at them for yourself. Now, the regulations that I have here tonight, I pulled straight off of the website. So these are accurate up to a couple of days ago. As far as I know, no changes have been made the last couple of days. And so these ought to be good for you. But again, don't take my word for it. You guys have to make sure that you know the regulations. Because if you get stopped by a game warden or SCDNR out on the water and you have a 13-inch redfish and the DNR officer is going to be like, hey, this is short. And you're going to be like, well, Chris from Dead Come Outdoors said 13 was good. That officer is going to be like, Chris who? Okay, you need to know the regulations. So guys, whatever you're targeting and whatever you're going to bring home that day, please make sure that you know the regulations and the limits. And if you guys are not on the website or have the app for SCDNR on your phone, download that and get it. It's got your license right here, so if you get checked on the water, and it's got the regulations right here also that you can check all right on your phone. So download that app, put it on your phone so you've got it with you all the time. So let's go over these regulations. So let's start with redfish. So if you guys are targeting redfish, redfish are 2 per person per day, not to exceed 6 per boat per day. So if you're on a boat with 6 guys, you can only have 6 redfish per day. Now, if you're in a kayak like myself, you can keep 2 per day. Okay. Now, there is a slot limit for redfish. So you can only keep a redfish that is between 15 and 23 inches. That's the slot. Anything shorter than 15 inches, you have to release. Anything bigger than 23 inches, you have to release. So if it's 23 and a quarter, it's too big. You've got to release him. And that's a good thing because those fish in the next year or two, those are our breeder fish. Those are the ones that's going to keep our inshore estuaries stocked up with fish. So let those breeders go and let them restock our fisheries. So let's hit flounder. Flounder is 5 per person per day, not to exceed 10 per boat per day. So again, if you have 10 people on the boat, you can only keep 10 flounder. That's not 50 flounder, because if there's 10 people on the boat and you think to yourself, oh, well, it's 5 per day per person, no. So if you're on a boat, it's 10 for the boat, for the entire boat. Again, if you're on a kayak, single person like myself, you can keep 5 per day. Now, the size limit for a flounder is bigger than 16 inches. So anything smaller than 16 inches, you have to release. So that 15 and 3/4, if you can't stretch that tail, you've got to let them go. Okay, there is not a max limit. So if you catch a 23, 24, 25-inch fish, you can keep that flounder, even though those are the big breeding females. I would love to see people let those go. Keep a 17, 18-inch flounder, and let the 20s and 21s go. Let that release over 20 flounder go. But that is up to you. There is no law or regulation preventing you to keep that fish. So you can keep it as long as it's bigger than 16 inches. So let's go over speckled trout. So speckled trout in South Carolina is 10 per person per day. It did not say anything about a boat limit. If there is a boat limit, I didn't see it, but if you're on a boat, check the regulations. Make sure that you guys are following the regulations. But the only thing that I could find for South Carolina is 10 per person per day. And they have to be bigger than 14 inches. So 14 inches and bigger you can keep. Anything smaller than 14 inches you have to release back. And again, just like flounder, I practice release over 20. So, those 20-inch trout, those are the big breeders. Those trout are probably 4 or 5 years old. They're older fish. They have survived. They got good genetics. And so the eggs that they lay are going to really have a strong gene line for the fish that are hatched. So again, there's no regulation. You can keep a 20 or a 22-inch trout. That is just fine. I practice release over 20. So, I always like to put that out there. Sheepshead. So I know a lot of guys ask me questions about sheepshead, so I wanted to go over that. So sheepshead are 10 per person per day, not to exceed 30 per boat per day. So again, there is a boat limit of 30 sheepshead per day, and they have to be over 14 inches. So again, under 14 inches, you have to release back. And there is no size limit. So again, you can keep a 20 or a 24-inch sheepshead. That is perfectly fine. Again, I do release over 20 and I release them back. So I don't target sheepshead very much. Matter of fact, I am really kicking around the idea of picking up some fiddler crabs for Sunday and maybe pitching around some docks and maybe trying to do a little bit of sheepshead fishing. So you never know. I don't know what I want to do yet, but it is definitely on the list of some things for me to do this weekend. And since we talked about black drum fishing under one of the questions, I went ahead and I put in black drum. So black drum has 5 per person per day. There was no boat limit that I could find, so 5 per person, but there is a slot limit on black drum. It's 14 to 27 inches. So I did not know that about black drum, and I actually learned something looking up the regulations. So anything smaller than 14 inches with black drum you have to release, and anything bigger than 27 you have to release. So again, I didn't know about the slot limit with black drum, and so yeah, it's really good for you guys to jump on, review these things every once in a while, review these regulations. They don't change very often. Usually the South Carolina House of Representatives are the ones that set the fishing regulations. It's not the Division of Wildlife. Everything goes through the House of Representatives for some reason. I don't know why, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's how it is. The Division of Wildlife works with the House here in South Carolina, and that's how our regulations are passed. So if you guys have questions, comments about that kind of stuff, get with your house rep and send them an email and tell them, your thoughts and feelings about the regulations. So, guys, I hope that is really helpful. Again, I know that there's a lot of guys who come through, excuse me, that is some of that 13th century. That's the 9-year reserve I'm sipping on right there. That's really good. That's my favorite. So I know that there's a lot of guys who are coming down from out of state, moving here, vacationing here. I get a ton of people who are coming down for a week or 10 days who are bringing their kayaks and want to do some fishing in Murrells Inlet or Pawleys or Cherry Grove or even down in Charleston. I've had a lot of guys saying, hey, I'm going to Charleston, what are the regulations? So I get a ton of vacationers, a lot of guys who are coming from Columbia, South Carolina, coming over to the coast who don't fish saltwater very much. I've had some guys from Greenville, from Tennessee, and the mountains of Georgia coming in. I get questions like this all the time because they're jumping on YouTube and they're trying to figure out and get some information on how to fish the saltwater. I'm only here, I'm going to be able to fish for a day or two, and they want to catch some fish, so they're trying to pick up some tips, some helpful hints, and they need to know some regulations. So, guys, I hope that helps you out. Again, I'm getting those questions quite a bit. That's why I wanted to hit that topic tonight. So, guys, if you have any questions, throw them up there into the chat box. And Everett, I see that you dropped a comment. He said, I see small flounder being kept about every time I go out. I've seen that also. Gosh, they are really looking for a fine. And, DNR has they can take your fishing gear along with fines. So, guys, keeping a short flounder is not worth it. It just really isn't. If you don't know, or if that fish is borderline 16 inches, if you don't really know if it's touching that line or not, I wouldn't keep it. Because I was told a long time ago the only measuring board that counts is the DNR officer's measuring board. If it does not touch that 16-inch line, you're going to be caught with a short fish or whatever that slot limit is. His board is the only board that counts. So, yeah, I have seen guys who have, oh, yeah, boy, he's just touching. Oh, if I stretch him, it's going to, that's on you. If it's not touching that line, I wouldn't keep it. Most of the time, I tell people, some of the best fish to eat are those ones, especially like flounder, 17, 18, 19-inch fish are great eating fish. Redfish, 18, 19-inch redfish are really good eating. When you start getting up to 23 inches, 20, 22, 23 inches, again, I've heard that it's not quite as good. I'm a fish lover. I would like it either way if it's 23 or not. I'm not a fish snob, but I would still eat it. But again, I've always heard that some of the best meat is kind of that 18, 19 inch, redfish, flounder, stuff like that. Tyler, hey, great to see you. Tyler says, can you touch on how the fishing will change moving into late November and into December in Murrells Inlet? Yeah, absolutely. And a matter of fact, Tyler, refresh my memory. I believe you were the one that asked me the question about the black drum. So I did touch on that tonight. So if you just jumped on, you can actually, this is a perfect time. You can actually jump on to YouTube, go back and re-watch this, or tomorrow I will have this up on Spotify, and you guys can always go back to Spotify. I'm throwing up some episodes up on Spotify right now, and I'm also kicking around doing some things on Spotify that I'm not going to do on DCO Live. Maybe just have it be about a 15 or 20-minute little podcast, maybe every couple of weeks. Pick a quick topic, maybe even talk about what I saw just on my last fishing trip and kind of keep that a little bit separate. So if you guys are interested in anything like that, let me know. But I am going to be throwing stuff up on Spotify. And when you do go over there, leave a review for me, leave a comment. Um, because leaving a review, leaving those good 4-star reviews, that's how it gets pushed out into the Spotify universe, and more guys can pick it up and it'll pop up on their homepage. But yes, let's talk about changing weather late November into December. So we are going to be getting a little bit of a cold front moving through this weekend. So as this water starts to cool down, these fish are going to, it's all going to be about being warm. So that's the one thing that you have to think about when you start going out into, November, December. Start watching your water temperatures. When I went out last weekend, the water temperature was still 70 degrees. It was still nice and warm. The air temperature, I think, got up to like 78. It was a beautiful day. I fished down at Paulie's. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. But as far as redfish go, as the water starts to cool down, you start seeing these redfish really start to school up. So the one thing that you're going to want to look for, one, you don't have to get up early during the winter time. Okay. Tyler said, "Yep, that was me about the black drum." So cool. Yeah. So yes, I did address that for you. So the one thing that you don't have to do during the winter time is get up early. So when it's cold out, sleep in, let the sun get up, let it start warming up the water. Okay. Start looking at the areas in your area that you're going to fish that the sun hits first. So if the sun comes up in the east, those western banks are going to get the sun first. So that's where you want to go to. You want to go to the areas where the sun hits first and let that water warm up. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing. If it's going to be breezy or windy, you want to look for wind protected areas. So think of it as if you have a hot piece of pizza or a hot, spoon or a fork of spaghetti, and you want to cool it down, you blow on it and it cools it down. That wind will push, cool water and cool air temperatures into that. So you want to look for areas with no wind where the sun is baking or warming up these still areas. Okay, so sun drenched, wind protected areas are going to be the areas that I focus on during the winter time. Okay, and then you're going to want to start looking for deeper holes. The deeper the hole, the deeper the water column, the warmer it's going to be towards the bottom. Okay, so that's what I'm going to look for now. As the water starts to warm up, these fish are going to become more active and move towards the top because the top is going to warm up before the bottom. Okay, and as the tide drops, the water is going to be warming as it gets down towards the bottom, and then it's going to start cooling up as the water starts to come in. So another thing that you want to look for is muddy bottoms. Muddy bottoms are darker in color and they're going to hold heat more than a light colored sand bottom. Same thing with oyster bars. Oyster bars and oyster rakes are going to hold heat longer than anything else. Those are almost like the inlet's radiators. They're going to hold heat. So sun-drenched areas, wind protected, muddy bottoms, oyster bars. If you can find an area with those four things during the wintertime, there's going to be bait and fish there almost guaranteed. Okay, I can't say 100% guaranteed, but that's where you're going to find the fish. Okay, because that's where the little bait fish are going to be at. It's going to be warm and they're going to be schooled up there. So look for those areas. But November and December are fantastic times to be out there fishing right now. Okay, so get out there and look for those areas. Again, sun drenched, no wind, wind protected, muddy bottoms, oyster bars, and oyster rakes. Okay, those are going to be the areas that I'm going to look for first. Right? Everett, I did call the game warden. They said they called them and they'd be out there. Yeah, if they're not busy and you're seeing things that are going on, yeah, you can call a game warden if you want. And if he's not busy, he may come out. And I do know that out at the Oyster Recycling Center, the game warden, SCDNR, they are out there quite a bit. And I'm seeing them more and more out there at the Oyster Recycling. So, yeah, absolutely. So, guys, go ahead and keep throwing those questions in. We are coming up on our 30 minutes, so I'll give it about another minute or two. But again, guys, I really appreciate you. Let's talk about fishing this weekend. So, the weather this weekend, excuse me, one second. So, D. Gilmore. D, is that for David? Let me know. Throw that in there. He says, Chris, is a fish finder worth it for a kayak? So here's what I use my fish finder for. I use it for the time, so I don't have to keep pulling my phone out. It's got the time on it. Water temperature and water depth. That's the only thing I use it for. And I also, Don Gilmore. Okay, great. Thanks, Don. Appreciate it. And I also use it to see if it's a hard bottom or oysters. I can tell now if it's a hard bottom, a nice slick hard bottom, or if it's oyster, it's really jagged and I can see that so I can keep my bait off of it. But I don't use a fish finder to actually mark fish. Now, I have gone over a deep hole and I have seen fish, down 10, 12 feet, and I've turned back around and I've made some casts. And I've picked up a fish or two doing that. But where my transducer sits underneath my kayak, it's right underneath my seat. So by the time I see the fish, I'm already past him. I'm already past those fish. So yeah, I don't use it to actually locate fish, but I love a fish finder on my kayak. Is it worth it? To me, yes. But just for those things, water depth, temperature, the time, and to see what kind of bottom that I am fishing. If I was out maybe offshore or near shore, like a quarter mile or a half a mile, I may use it a little bit more to actually find schools of fish. But inshore, skinny water, and I'm going to say 10 feet or less, as far as a quote fish finder and looking for schools of fish, that's not how I'm finding them. I'm using other clues to find my fish, like shorebirds, busting bait, um, wakes on the top of the water. That's how I'm using. I'm using my eyes more than the fish finder to actually locate and find fish in skinny water. So, yeah, I hope that helps you out. But yeah, I don't go out without my fish finder. I love it. So you ask me, is it worth it on a kayak? Yeah, it is, because there's other things that you can use it for. And my Garmin Striker 4, I can actually set waypoints also. So if I find that oyster bar, so yeah, so there's a lot of good advantages to having a fish finder on your kayak. Young, appreciate you. He just threw up a question. He says, "What's the best advice to hook a flounder?" So we get this all the time. Do we um, set the hook right away, or do you wait a couple of seconds before you set the hook? Anything like that? So yeah, so let me address that. There's a lot of things that you can, find out, and if you ask 10 different fishermen who flounder fish, they will give you 10 different answers. So when I'm fishing and I feel a thump, I'm setting the hook. I may wait a second or two, but that is it. I'm not counting to 10, or I'm not, as some guys, well, I'll sit and I'll drink a beer and then set the hook. No, that's not, you know, when you feel that thump, they've grabbed onto it enough that you can go ahead, give it a second or two, and then you can set the hook and be pretty confident that you've got a flounder. Okay. Um, Again, don't get too froggy with it. Don't get too quick. But, most of these predator fish, when they're ready to eat, they are not playing with their food. They are going to hit it, they are going to suck it down. And so, yeah, give it a second, feel the thump, and then go ahead and set the hook. That's what I do. I lose a lot of fish. Flounder are notorious for shaking hooks. Trout are notorious for shaking hooks because they just come up to the surface and they just shake their head so violently that, those hooks just fly. So, yeah, I hear, I see comments of guys saying, man, you just suck at catching flounder. You lose so many flounder. Hey, that's flounder fishing. If you're not losing flounder, you are the man, okay? But everybody loses flounder. Flounder are notorious for escaping the net and for shaking hooks. And if you flounder fish long enough, it's going to happen to you too. So, I could on my videos not show those flounder getting off and only show all the good stuff, but you guys know me. I'm an open book. I miss fish. I lose fish. It's fishing. It's fun. I really don't. I don't care. But yeah, give it a second or two, and you ought to be in good shape. So Everett, you seem to just load the rod instead of a hook set most of the time. Yes, okay. Um, I let the rod do a lot of the work. That's what that rod is for. Now, yeah, I will set the hook on some things, but yeah, I let the rod do most of the work. Absolutely. Yep, you're exactly right. Young threw up something else. Is low tide worth going out? Yes, that is my favorite tide. So if I can only fish one tide for the rest of my life, it is the last 2 hours of the outgoing tide, the low tide, and the first 2 hours of the incoming tide. That's my favorite. Um, I just have confidence. I love it. It concentrates fish in those creeks. It pulls everything out of that grass, off of the flats, and concentrates the bait, the shrimp, the predator fish, everything into these small areas. I love low tide fishing. Again, if I could only fish, if the good Lord said, Chris, you've only got one tide to fish for the rest of your life, that would be mine. Okay. Again, can you fish? Is there great fishing at high tide? Absolutely. Absolutely. I love getting up onto the flats at high tide. You guys have seen me up on the flats pulling big redfish, getting up into the grass. Yeah, high tide is fine. It's great. You just have to go find the fish. Things are more spread out during high tide. You don't know where they're going to be at, but if you think like the bait fish or shrimp, they're going to move to protected areas. So as the tide comes up, they're going to move into the grass. They're going to move under the docks. They're going to move way back into the creeks to try to get away from the predators. Well, those predators are going to follow that bait because they want to eat. So they're going to move into the grass. They're going to move under those docks. They're going to move all the way back into those creeks where they can't go any further. So if you can think like bait, think like the shrimp or the little bait fish, as the tide comes up, where would you go for protection so that I don't get eaten by redfish? That's where I'm going to be targeting the predator fish. So, hey, high tide is just as good as anything else. I prefer low tide. So, Clay, I seem to catch a lot more lizardfish and ribbonfish than you seem to do. Do you cut them out of the footage or do you really catch them sparingly? You know, so yeah, I catch lizardfish. Sometimes I put them in the videos. A lot of times I don't. But those lizardfish and ribbonfish and pinfish, they will pick at your lure really, really fast. And if I throw into an area and I start feeling that tick, 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 I reel in my lure very quickly to get it away from them because one, they will bite off the tails of my lures and then I've got, to put on something new. So yeah, I usually reel it in, get my lure out of there very quickly because I know that those quick ticks are not a redfish, flounder, or a trout. Those game fish, those predator fish, they don't, and again, I'm going to air quote, they don't play with their food. When they're ready to eat, they hit it hard, and they slurp it up, and they grab it, and they hold on to it. So a redfish won't tick, 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 tick on your lure. They won't do that. They will hit it and take it down and pin it on the bottom so that they can eat it and get that food back into the crushers, crush it and eat their food. So again, if you're around an oyster bar and you feel that, just go ahead and reel in really fast, get it away from them, and cast off a little bit further off into the distance or off to the side and try to get away from those. Okay. But yeah, I catch lizardfish, I catch ribbonfish, I catch needlefish just like everybody else. When I was down at Polly's last weekend, I caught a needlefish, and yeah, I mean, he hit a little bitty shrimp that I was throwing around, and I just flicked him off, and he won't make the footage. Yeah, it's just a junk fish. Sometimes I put him in the video, sometimes I don't. It just kind of all depends, It's not a sexy fish to catch, so. But yeah, I throw it in, but yes, I do. I catch them just as much as anybody else. They show up this time of the year, and you're going to catch them. They're all over the place. They are. They're all over the place. So, again, guys, great questions tonight. So, again, I want to talk fishing this weekend. I am probably not going to be fishing Saturday. The cold front is going to be pushing through. And Saturday, there's going to be, I'm seeing 15 to 20 mile an hour winds. I won't go out in my kayak, so I'm probably going to be doing some Christmas shopping and trying to get ahead of that. And there is actually a band coming into town that I have been waiting to see for years and years. Watershed is coming into Tin Roof, so I definitely don't want to be on the water fishing. I want to go see those guys. So I'm really excited about that. But I am going to be going out Sunday. Right now it looks like the wind is going to be between 10 and 15. Again, that's going to be kind of borderline for me, but I am going to head out and at least check it. And I am going to be throwing probably like a popping cork. I want to start popping that out and get that out. So I'm going to throw a popping cork. I've got a wake bait tied on, and I may even throw a spinner bait. So I'm going to throw some different things probably on Sunday. And the reason I'm doing that is if the wind is going to be up and there's maybe a little bit of chop on the water, I'm going to want something to distinguish my lure from the choppiness of the waves. So a good cupped popping cork that makes a lot of noise on the surface would work really well. So, and a spinner bait with that thump would probably work well. And if there's a lot of chop on the water from the windy days on Saturday and Sunday, I am thinking that the inlet is going to be a little stirred up. It's probably going to be a little bit cloudy. It's not going to be clear water, so the noise and the vibration may attract in some fish. So that's why I'm thinking popping cork and maybe some kind of a spinner bait, Redfish Magic or an underspin or something like that to put off a little bit of a flash or a thump, and maybe even a wake bait. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. The temperature isn't going to be too bad. We're probably talking maybe lower 70s for highs. And then the tides in Merle's Inlet in the morning, I think we're going to be like a couple hours before low tide. So the tides for me are going to work out really well. I love that tide. So yeah, it's going to be kind of working outgoing tide the first couple hours of the day, and then the rest of the day incoming, and then dropping back off again. So guys, I hope that helped you out. We almost went 50 minutes tonight, and again, I really appreciate all the questions. Guys, I love this. I really appreciate you guys. Go check out all of the past episodes on Spotify. It's DCO Live on Spotify. If you guys just search that, it will pop up. And again, I would appreciate if you would leave a review and leave a comment. You guys know I answer all my comments. And if you got any questions, you can leave them there. Go check out 13th Century Whiskey at 13thcenturywhiskey.com. And guys, I will see you out on the water. I've got a new video dropping on Saturday. I hope you guys enjoy it. And again, keep those comments coming. I will see you out on the water. Guys, I appreciate you. I will see you next time.